The 2021 Virtual Business Conference, February 12th. Jarrett Chirico. Connecting the dots through racket sports, monetizing and using pickleball to grow tennis.
It is my pleasure to introduce Jarrett Chirico, who's the director of rackets at Baltimore Country Club, which is a top 50 platinum club in the country. He played at the University of Virginia and has over 1,000 people playing pickleball in his program weekly. He's probably one of the few people in the world who is both a world-class tennis player and a world-class pickleball player. I give you Jarrett.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. Kevin, thank you for that. My name, again, is Jarrett Chirico, and I'm thrilled to be here talking about connecting the dots through racket sports, as well as monetizing and using pickleball to grow tennis. My background, similar to probably everybody here, was 100% in tennis. I was #1 in the country, top 20 in the world. I played world team tennis for the Philadelphia Freedoms. So the idea that even to be here talking in part about pickleball still is surprising to me. When I talk today, I really want us to start thinking about trends and always looking for what's next, innovating, not being afraid to take risks, because ultimately the shift from tennis to rackets as a whole is a risk to many. But ultimately, as we take risks is how we succeed. And I'm going to tell you my story, and this will point out a lot of ways and a lot of things that are shifting in our industry, because the one thing that we found for certain is though golf will always be the foundation for country clubs, it's rackets that's now the future for growth, participation, and connecting the dots through all areas of the club. And ultimately, what we've really found recently is that pickleball is responsible for the growth of rackets as a whole. So let's get started. Let me switch my slide. What we know about rackets, and this is kind of before the COVID boom that's going on right now. In general, tennis has been flat for the last 10 to 15 years. There's been a little drop, there's been a little gain. In the last year, due to COVID, we all know that it grew up to 21 million. I think it went from 17 to 21 million. But in that time where tennis has been flat, we've seen other racket sports really start to grow. Pickleball was growing at 25%. Squash and paddle have double-digit growth. Squash ultimately is being hurt right now with COVID. But in 2019, out of 750,000 new players came to tennis from pickleball. And this is all important because ultimately what we found is in the absence of tennis really leading, and we all know that tennis is it's struggling because for many reasons, the biggest, there's no stars in the United States, and soon there's no real stars in the world on the Pro Tour. And for the many reasons that contributed to that, we've seen a rise in rackets as a whole. And I think we all know that, tennis courts down the shore, tennis courts at parks, we've seen the pickleball lines down, we've seen a rise in paddle, especially at country clubs. And ultimately, it's starting to change our career. So it was really that in the absence of tennis leading, we've seen a huge rise in rackets as a whole. And when you think of rackets as a whole, the idea is to create a total rackets program. And a total rackets program is not only having multiple racket sports, but being able to play, coach, staff, and program, which allows you to connect the dots through all racket sports. It is one racket sport working to grow all racket sports. So what does that really mean? It's the idea that you're able to go on a pickleball court and have 50 people, 60 people, whatever that may be, and have the right staff that knows how to play, coach, program, tennis, paddle, and pickleball that can now take those players from pickleball and put them on the tennis court. It's going out and being able to now teach a tennis clinic and being able to explain the advantages of paddle or pickleball. Because what we found is, and I'll show you later in the slide, is on average, there's a 30% crossover rate between racket sports. So what you find is, let's just say there's 100 people playing pickleball. On average, 30% of those people will now move over and try tennis. And for people that have never played racket sports, because ultimately that's the goal of pickleball. Pickleball gets people that have never played a racket sport come and try. We have 80% of those people that are now staying and playing. So some things to think about when you're looking at, a total rackets program is understanding that everything starts with the director, and every leader has two responsibilities: first to the club and your membership, and second to the industry. We have to understand, and this is what has really been lost in tennis for many years, is that the director's job is to mentor and take care of our staff, because it's the people under us that are ultimately going to be changing the industry far into the future. You need to be an expert. And what we've seen is, through tennis, we all know that many pros, and not everyone here, because everybody here, congratulations, we want to get better. We want to be the best. We're continually pushing to learn. But many tennis pros, as you'll see, because let's just say there's 65 people here, there's probably another 2,000 tennis pros that are USPTA that aren't here. And those are the people that aren't looking for what's next and not trying to learn from each other. We have to be passionate and invested. A passionate person will always get other pros excited, getting them to learn. And that's really the difference right now between tennis and pickleball. Is tennis players were passionate in the 70s. They were passionate in the 80s. That's what had that huge tennis boom. And that's what's happening in pickleball now. But ultimately, these two sports are working hand in hand together. Tennis directors have to always be looking for what's next. And what you find is the more successful a tennis director is, the less they want to do. Because if you can do one thing right, you can make a lot of money, especially at these big clubs. Even like my club, you can make a lot of money coasting, doing the same clinics. You have the same members that come in for the same lessons every week, and it's fine. But ultimately, we're not really servicing our members, and we're definitely not servicing the industry, because all programs die in 3 to 5 years if nothing's changed. And things that are changing are not only changing up how we program, but it's changing up our staff. When we hire staff, we should be thinking we're going to keep them for a max of 3 years. And maybe if it's a head pro position, 5. And if they last longer than that, in many cases, it's our fault, because we need to be helping them become directors or head pros at other clubs. So not only that they can advance the industry, but that they can also advance their careers. That's what being a leader is. It's not just getting them to help you grow your club, but it's you growing them and growing them in the industry. Being a mentor, and many people think that being a mentor is just having somebody under you that you're helping to guide. But the biggest thing I'll say about mentorship is it works two ways. Many of the things that I've learned over my career have come from the many pros that have worked under me, especially summer staff that comes in. Everybody's going to have new ideas, and that's really what it comes to, risking. And nothing great ever comes from a comfort zone. And I think one of the greatest advantages that we've seen in 2020 through COVID was that many people had to take risks for the first time. Because if you didn't, many people were going under, because there was, and this is on a club standpoint, not even tennis, because we know that a lot of people are coming back to play tennis, but on a club standpoint, we're taking risks again, because right now, anything you try, if you fail, it's okay. You can blame it on COVID and move on. But ultimately, many of these risks that were happening are becoming rewards. Great things are happening. And when you think about, pickleball and tennis, the overall idea is to create value for our members and value for our students. And if it can be a 1 amenity club that can now become 2 amenities by adding pickleball lines, it's not taking one thing away from one sport and adding it to another. Because the one thing that we know is if somebody is not coming to your club to play tennis, say they're just coming to play pickleball, at least they're coming to your club. Because if you lose them, they're gone forever. But if you can keep them, you can get them back into other sports. So really what happened to me in my career is I became a director when I was 25 at Green Valley Country Club. And when I started, I really was thinking about, what do I do? How do I fill the courts? I think as a director, one of the most important things we can do before we even think about, programming and staffing is how do we get the people on the courts? The worst thing in my mind is to see a court that's empty. And what motivates me and keeps me up at night is getting excited about clinics that have 15, 20, 30 people. And that's really what you see with pickleball too. And the goal of every director should be to put programs in place that fill the courts. And you have to think, I can't say it enough, you got to think about what is next. And what we found is, for me is I always get nervous when things are going great. And the thing that you'll all know is when things are going great, that's the time to grow. Because when things start going bad, it's too late. The time to take chances are when things are going the best they can do. So for me, it happened one summer. We had just done about $90,000 in junior summer camp. Green Valley is a small club. It has 3 indoor courts, 4 outdoor courts. So, $90,000 in junior summer camp was huge. And I knew in that moment there was nothing else that we could do. There was nowhere else to grow. And it started to, you don't want the roller coaster effect of clubs where you're doing well, you're doing bad, you're doing well, you're doing bad. How do you maintain the high level? So I started to look all over. And ultimately, I found pickleball because it was being played in a park near my house. And I went there and I was shocked. I was shocked that there were 60 people playing. There was nobody really leading. People put $1 in a shoebox to play. And people were organizing and playing and moving around. And it was so spectacular to see that it was really impressive. So what I did is I started pickleball one Friday night, and we charged $5. We did it from 7:30 to midnight. And at the time, I remember my GM wanted us to charge $20 because in Philadelphia, you can get that much money for indoor court time. But we charged $5 from 7:30 to midnight. And it grew with 16 people the first time we did it. The second time we did it, the second week, we had 34 people. The third week, we had 50 people, and it continued to go from there. Eventually, we raised the price to $10 a person, and it grew from one night to 7 days a week, sometimes 2 times in a day. And just by charging $10 a person, Green Valley was able to make over $100,000 a year in open play. And when you think about that, that's a huge number. And think about a tennis court. You charge $10 a person. On one tennis court, you can get 16 people playing pickleball. But on one tennis court, if you sell that for doubles, what are you making? 40, 60, maybe $80 an hour, depending on how north you go in the Northeast. We focus next on, when we're thinking about what's next, on summer camps. How do we do a camp for pickleball? And we found that we can put more people in a place at one time. So we had 136 people that paid $350 a person, and we made almost $50,000. And the cost of that camp to have the best players in the world come and teach it was below $12,000. After that, we started to think, well, what's next? We had to add tournaments. And this is something that I'll show later when we talk about monetizing pickleball, is when you think about a tennis tournament, great tournament, you might get 32 people, you host a national, you get 64. On average, you get 200 to 300 people in a pickleball tournament in 3 days. The average amount a person pays is $50. So when you're making $10,000 to $15,000 in a weekend, that's an amazing amount of money. But what I want you to think, everything that I just said equaled about 750 to 1,000 people coming a week. But the true value of pickleball has nothing to do with how much money is coming in. The true value of pickleball has to do with the total number of people that are using your courts. It's about participation over revenue. It doesn't matter how much money you can get out of one person, but how many times you can get that person to come back. The true value of pickleball, paddle, and tennis is connecting the dots. Participation should always be the #1 goal. So taking a look at indoor courts, this is 3 tennis courts, which is equal to about 10 to 12 pickleball courts. And when you're looking on outside courts, just to show you how one amenity clubs can easily become 2, when you look at this, you can have it filled up and have 12 people playing doubles. But when you fill this up with pickleball, you can have over 60 people playing. So on these 3 courts, we were able to have 50 people on the 10 courts, which contributed to about $5,000 in camp, or 30% new people playing tennis. I can tell you that Baltimore Country Club has an 85% crossover rate. So when you think for Green Valley's purposes, when you have about 1,000 people coming per week to play pickleball, at 30%, that's about 300 new players coming to play tennis. It's a pretty substantial number. So in the end, what you have to focus on is if you can control the numbers, meaning if you can control the amount of people that come to play and use your facility, you can control the numbers, meaning you can control the revenue. And again, your revenue comes from the amount of people that are on your courts It comes from the amount of people that are crossing over into other sports, but ultimately it grows one sport into the other. So what I want everybody to think about is, why is pickleball growing, and how do you measure the growth between tennis and pickleball? And though this slide is not to scale, I really want you to think about this, because you can measure the amount of people that can play tennis with a yardstick. And it would take a football field to measure the amount of people that can play pickleball. And that's something that's really important when you're thinking about how you get entry points into racket sports at your clubs. You see, there's 99 million people in this country that aren't athletic, that don't do sports, that they go home, they go to work, they play video games, they watch TV, whatever. But those 99 people are the ones that are driving pickleball. They are coming to your club for the first time. I can tell you, pickleball we have 3,300 members at our club, and pickleball has brought 69% of people that have never come to our rackets facility ever there for the first time. And again, we keep about 80% of those people. So when you think about it, pickleball creates the ultimate entry point. It's a way to start people earlier. A lot of times when your age is 3 to 6, it's hard to start playing tennis. And kids either quit, one, we know because they're not having fun is the biggest reason. Our parents pull them out because if we're having too much fun with the kids, they feel like they're not learning anything. So something we do is we put a pickleball paddle in kids' hands and we have them hit an orange dot tennis ball. And then we go from pickleball to tennis. And it's amazing how quick that transfer happens. Also, you have to think about the fact that when people get older, maybe they can't play tennis anymore. Pickleball keeps them at your facility longer. The ultimate thing is when you think about clubs, if you can have somebody coming to play tennis for an hour and a half or 2 hours, finally they're going to go and play pickleball after that, maybe for another hour or 2 hours. Now the time that they're at your club is a lot longer. And when you think about a parent being at a club for 3 to 5 hours instead of 2, now your junior programs are going to go up because the parents have to have something to do for the kids. So connecting the dots and programming all together is one and the same. So when you look at pickleball by the very impressive, I would say, numbers, on the left, you can see a scale and it says in 2019, there were 3.46 million people that played. As of January 21, there were 4.2 million people that play. And I can tell you these numbers, and I present these numbers at many conferences, they're skewed and they're wrong simply because it doesn't account for the snowball effect. And the snowball effect is really what's happening in our sport. When you think about the country clubs, the colleges, the high schools, where pickleball is really starting to grow quickly, these numbers aren't accounted for because these people aren't USAPA members, they're not playing tournaments. But when you look at one club, when you look at Green Valley that has 1,000 people a week, when you look at Baltimore Country Club, for example, that didn't have pickleball 3 years ago and now has hundreds of people playing, when you start adding those numbers, you start to see that the real number of pickleball right now is somewhere around 6.4 to 6.6 million. We're estimating that in 2 to 3 years, there'll be 10 million people playing and 16 million people in 5 years. The important stat is that in 8 years, pickleball will be the #1 played racket sport in the country. And that's huge for tennis because the more people that are on your courts, all that happens is if we can have the right staff that goes on the court that can connect the dots between pickleball and tennis, your tennis programs are going to rise. And again, with the lack of pros, with the Federers and the Nadals and the Djokovic's fading out, pickleball and the participation it brings is going to be what replaces the excitement and grows tennis again. So in the end, it doesn't matter if people play tennis, pickleball, or whatever at your facility. All that matters is that they're using your facility. On the left, you can see us. This is our junior tennis and pickleball camps. We had hundreds of people last summer. And on the right was an adult pickleball tournament that we ran at the same time. And it's amazing by cross-programming how many people you can get that fill your courts. It doesn't matter to me what sport they're playing. It just matters that my courts are filled. So then when I went to Baltimore Country Club, it was slightly different. Green Valley is a smaller club, and Baltimore Country Club, like I said, is a top 50 platinum club. So it's huge different membership tier. It's a big golf club. But when we looked at the opportunities versus the obstacles, what we knew was that out of 3,300 members, about 60% of our members went to Florida over the winter months. And as a director, we have to always be looking for trends. And knowing that so many of our members went to Florida, we knew that we had to get involved with pickleball because they're playing it down there. And if our members were going to Florida and playing pickleball half the year, we know when they came home, they would search out pickleball as well. And if we're not offering it, we're going to eventually lose them. Our facilities didn't have pickleball. So what we did is we pulled up a tennis court and we created the first dedicated clay pickleball courts in the country. And by doing that, we were able to add new amenities. Staffing then was the ultimate goal. And luckily for us, we changed out our staff, and instead of tennis professionals, we focused on rackets professionals. And that's where the industry is going. The day of the tennis professionals, the pickleball professionals, the paddle professionals, those are going out the window, because ultimately clubs can't afford to have that many pros on staff. And ultimately, if I have someone that can just teach pickleball and someone that can just teach tennis and someone that can just teach paddle, I'm losing money. I'm losing participation, because ultimately the tennis pros will teach tennis, the pickleball pros will teach pickleball, members will come, they'll leave, they'll go home, nothing happens. You have to now focus on rackets professionals. And unfortunately, many don't exist yet. So it's our job to train them and educate them, because we know that we can't fake it. You only get one shot at a first impression. So we know if there's 100 people playing pickleball, we need to get at least 30% of them out playing tennis. And if we have a huge tennis program, I just had a conference where I spoke to a big program in Guam. They have 800 people that come every week and they want to know how to start pickleball. Tennis is a great spot on the flip side to grow pickleball, but it's one sport working again to grow the other. And these are all setting achievable goals that can start by growing, let's get 10 people on the pickleball court. The next week we'll get 20. Remember, just like tennis was in the 70s, pickleball is growing at the largest part by word of mouth and making that experience fun and exciting the first time around. So some highlights for us when we were at Baltimore Country Club is I started on June 25th. And on July 1st, I had one court removed and I put down pickleball lines. And when I talked about taking risks, this is something that was a huge risk. When you think about a platinum club and women's teams, and everybody wants their courts, to pull up one tennis court right off the bat in your first week is pretty risky. But you also have to think, not only is it about growing pickleball, but on those 4 pickleball courts that I now put on one tennis court, now my 10 and under program was able to have 4 courts instead of needing 4 tennis courts. So pickleball courts we use a lot just to grow our 8 and under and 10 and under programs, and it's been huge. So you can cross program on those same courts. Like I said before, BCC now is an 85% crossover rate. With the hundreds of people that are now playing paddle, now they come to play pickleball. And I can tell you our ladies teams and our juniors has grown from the men that were now golfers that switched to paddle, that came to pickleball, that they're now playing tennis. This summer alone, pickleball grew by 204%, and we have a 404% growth in rackets. So the idea is, if you don't have space, make space, and don't take no for an answer. Because I'm telling you, and I see this all over the country, I travel quite a bit, and one amenity clubs are going away. And again, it's all about the value that we can provide for our members. People want amenities. They want more for their money. And they want pros that are just as excited and share in their enthusiasm for the games that they love. So don't be one of the people that's scared of pickleball. Embrace it. Reach out. Get certified. Learn. And I promise you, your members will thank you for it. And you're all going to make a lot more money because of it. So what does this all mean? Again, if you're a one racket sport club or director, you need more options. I see this all the time with many of my friends that are search executives. Tennis director positions are disappearing and they're being replaced with rackets professionals. I know we were one of the first clubs in the country that got rid of all of our tennis staff and replaced them all with rackets pros. My head pro, Colin Johns, happens to be 2 in the world in pickleball, but he was also on the ATP tour for tennis. And because of that, he was able to pick up paddle really quickly. And one of the initial things that we did for him in the beginning was we sent him up to Connecticut to work with the best paddle players. And by doing that, it's ultimately grown all of rackets and helped us cross program and helped us staff the staff under us. The goal is to create value for our members. And again, this is ultimately going to change how we staff, program, teach, but ultimately how we communicate. And COVID-19 really has only accelerated this. This is something that has happened before the pandemic. We were starting to see smaller clubs start to disappear, and larger clubs, because they were able to offer more amenities, were swallowing them up. You know, we're really entering the golden age for rackets because it's limitless potential for directors. They have the opportunity to make more money than ever before, put more people on the courts than ever before. But the job and what's expected of us is more than ever before. We now have to be an expert in multiple sports, not just one sport. And we also now have to be able to train experts in multiple sports. So focus on the number of players, not the amount of revenue. You never get another shot at a first impression. And this is important because a lot of the times, and I see this all over the country, we put out, you know, a lot of times I see people put a tennis pro out on a pickleball court and they try to teach it like tennis. And it doesn't matter if you're the worst, and we've seen this in paddle too. It doesn't matter if you're the worst pickleball player or the best. It's culty, just like paddle. They know when you're BSing them. So invest in the staff. You never get another shot at a first impression. And I promise you, once you keep these players, they'll be with you forever. Jumpstart programs through professional clinics and even camps. You know, some of the greatest things that we have done are these professional clinics around the country that have really gotten members excited. You know, we go into clubs, they bring in a top 10 player, and it doesn't matter if people know pickleball or not, everybody can relate to a number. So if you say the number 1 player in the country, the number 2 player in the world or whatever is coming, people will sign up. Then it's just up to us to keep them there. And you cannot fake it with pickleball, paddle, and squash. Unfortunately, some of us, not here, but in general, have faked it for tennis for a long time. So we need to reinvest in ourselves and our staff. And once you lose people, as we know, they're gone forever. So keep reinvesting. Remember, every racket sport provides an opportunity to connect the dots through other racket sports. View one racket sport as a vehicle to another. Pickleball is your vehicle to grow tennis. Tennis is your vehicle to grow pickleball. If you're lucky enough to have paddle at your club, I'm sure you guys don't, because as I look in some of your backgrounds and see the sun, I'm jealous. You know, the goal there is going to be pickleball and tennis that really grow each other. And for many of you that are in Georgia and Florida, you know, you're already in the pickleball, you know, center of the country. So it's even, you know, there's even more of a focus to get the right staff to be able to grow. So let's talk about how you monetize pickleball. And this is something that I get all the time. I'm lucky enough to certify players all over the country. And the $1 million question that we always get is, how do I make money off pickleball? Who profits the most off pickleball? And I'll tell you, and this is, you know, one of the harder things with pickleball is, you know, it's either the club or the director that makes the most money off pickleball. Pickleball is not done like tennis. It's not private lessons. It's getting a group of people out that are playing. So the total pot usually goes to the director or whoever is in charge of the club. And what you find is you have the staff under you that begins to be, you know, slightly unmotivated because they're not making as much money. But it's about the big picture. Do I charge the same amount for pickleball as I do for tennis? And the idea is absolutely, because it's just as hard. It takes the same amount of education, knowledge, and dedication to be able to teach a tennis lesson as it does a pickleball lesson. Should I do more privates or clinics? What does open play look like? All of this, you know, we're going to cover in the next few slides. The right question, again, as we talked about before, is how many players are we getting on the court at one time? And remembering that every player is an opportunity to connect the dots through other sports. Think about how many players you can get on the courts. If you can have a tennis pro that learns pickleball, that can go on the court in open play and just play in, and he's respected in pickleball, he will get more tennis lessons out of that. If you have somebody that's great at tennis and he's teaching amazing tennis lessons, but he's also excited about pickleball, he will get pickleball clinics out of that. And they cross program and everybody makes money, but ultimately the member and player has a much better experience and way better value. So there's 3 tiers of revenue for pickleball. There's open play. Open play is really just people playing. It's people on the court. It's organized. So in the beginning, when you do open play, it's not broken up very much. You're not doing levels. You're just getting people out. It takes a pro out there that can really organize it for people, maybe separate the levels, play in. Professional camps and clinics are ways that we do these every month at my club, as well as traveling around. This is where you bring in a top player. The player makes money, the club makes money, and the players and members at the clubs have an incredible experience, and then ultimately tournaments. So these are the 3 tiers and the only tiers you really want to focus on when you're growing pickleball. And keep in mind, though I'm talking about revenue right now, these 3 tiers are how you get the most amount of people on the court at one time. So what does open play look like, and how do you monetize it? What do you charge? How do you grow? So this is where I talked about where we charge $5 a person, and ultimately we grew it to $10 a person. Now, I've seen this all over the country. You know, in the Northeast, in indoor times, they might charge 20. That's up to you and your members and knowing what the sweet spot is. Being in the South, you might not be able to charge as much because it's outdoor, you charge a little bit less. The key is, once you get these people coming and they find the value in it and they know that they can get good games when they come, they're going to keep coming back. So it's not about, again, how much money you're charging from one person. What we found is, on average, where tennis players come between 1 to 2 times a week, pickleball players are coming between 3 and 5 times a week coming out to play. So when you start with open time, we're not focused again on level. As you start growing and there's people on the courts and you're constantly growing high numbers, that's when you start breaking it down between 3-0 and maybe 3-5 come at this time, 3-5 and 4-0 at another time, 4-0 to 4-5 at another time. As you break these clinics apart, this is where lessons also start to come, because you have to give them a way to get from one level to the next. Everybody's always going to think that they're better than they are, so have guidelines and then give them a chance to challenge in. When they can't challenge in, they know that they have to go back to their level, and in 6 weeks or whatever you said, they get another chance to challenge in. This gives them something to work towards. They know that the level's there and they're going to keep coming. What I would find is, on average, no matter where you are in the country, open play is between 40 to 60 people every time that you do it. And when we do open play, even though 16 people can be on one tennis court, what you want to think about is you want to schedule 6 people per pickleball court. So if you have 4 pickleball courts on one tennis court, you really want 24 people there, because 4 people are playing, 2 people are waiting, and then they're rotating. What you find with pickleball is people don't want to play like doubles tennis for an hour and a half and leave. People want to stay between 2.5 and 3 hours. And though they want to be there and it's social, they also get tired. So when you have 6 people per court, the 2 people that are waiting, it goes very quick. And remember, you're switching around between four courts. The professional camps that I was talking about are really the key if you have a pickleball program that you want to get off the ground, that hasn't started yet, or you want to give it a jump start. And being in Florida, especially in the South, this is very easy because there's so many top pickleball pros that are in the South, either living or down there all the time. So on the left, this is something that my head pro and I do all over. This is an example at Lancaster Country Club, where you're really sharing another success, but it gives membership the chance to be with the best players in the game. And the way it works is, like I said before, every member, everybody that signs up, the club is making money from, the director's making money. But also that's paying for the pros to come. So the club puts nothing out of their pocket. All they have to do is get the people to sign up. But how excited are your members when you can say, I have the number 2 player in the world, I have the number 5 player in the world coming to teach you pickleball. It's amazing how many people you can get on the court. We did this over the summer up in Connecticut, and we did 9 camps at 6 clubs in 3 days. And in that time, we saw about 300 people in those camps. And what's amazing about it is not that there were 300 people in those camps, it's that 50% of those people, 150 players, had never played tennis before. They were golfers at these clubs, the Greenwich Country Clubs, the Weeburn Country Clubs, that had never played a racket sport, that came for the first time to do these camps because they recognized that a top pro was coming to their club and they wanted to experience it. And then later, when we called back these clubs, 4 months later, we found that 50% of those 150 people stayed and played pickleball or tennis and kept coming to rackets. So the growth and the connection between the two is extraordinary, because that never would have happened before. And I can tell you at my club, we have members all the time that have been members for 15 to 20 years that have never stepped foot in the Rackets facility that are now coming for the first time to play pickleball. And they're using it, which is ultimately helping the club as a whole. But now when they're coming, now their kids start to come and their husbands or wives start to come. So tennis grows, paddle grows. And on the right is just another example of how we market and do camps. This is one we're doing in our club where we're bringing the #1 player in the world. And just to give you an idea of the excitement of these things, I posted this online for 2 days about 2 weeks ago. This is in June, so I don't know, it's like 6 months away. We have 36, we're doing 96 people in the camp. We sold 50% out of it in 2 days, 6 months early. I had to pull it off the website so my members had time to sign up. It's amazing the excitement when you market it. And again, when you have those people on your courts, it's up to you, it's up to your staff to be able to pull them into the many other programs that you're going to offer. The new craze too, once you start pickleball, and this is going to be seen all over Florida, are ratings clinics. So when you really start to think, and I can't tell you enough, think about what's next. Once you start pickleball, what's going to come is they're going to want leagues and they're going to want open play. And open play, ultimately, they're going to need to know what level they are when you start breaking it apart or you break courts apart based on level. When you eventually get to leagues, they're going to have to be placed based off of level. So the next thing that's really starting to take off, and these camps are sold out everywhere, are ratings clinics. And ratings clinics aren't just, let's go there and here's your rating and go home. What this is about is really about the professional. So the players come, they spend 2 hours playing. So this isn't just 30 minutes, I see you, this is your rating. It's 2 hours so you see all parts of their game. And not only do they get a rating, they get an improvement sheet. And on that sheet, it breaks down the 4 parts of pickleball. And for those that aren't familiar, it's the kitchen, it's the transition, it's serve, and it's return. And in those 4 zones, it maps out a bunch of different things and it scores them between 1 and 5. So now they can take this piece of paper to their professionals and say, God, I'm a 3.5. I really thought I was a 4.0, but this is what I need to work on to improve. Help me. And the pros are getting so many more lessons out of it and focus lessons so they know what to work on, which has been extraordinary for clubs. And again, this only works if you have the right staff, if you have the Rackets professionals. And it's up to the directors to create these Rackets professionals. And we can't do it if us ourselves as leaders are only, one sport directors. Tournaments, this comes up a lot, and I would say, a couple of the USPTA conferences that I talked at, many people were always, we only run tennis tournaments. And I can tell you, again, I'm not someone that is just pickleball. My whole life, as I told you, was tennis, but I'm all about rackets. And when you look at clubs, all of us know we have to put people on the courts. And I used to run 2 USTA tournaments when I got to Baltimore Country Club a month. So for boys and girls. So I don't know, we ran like 12 or 13 tournaments the first summer. And what I noticed is, it's filling the courts because they make it so difficult when you do consolations and round robins and compass draws. Your courts are filled all day, but members can't use your courts. I'm not pulling any retention because these are, not guests that can use my club for anything. And then they leave and the club doesn't make any money. But then when you do a pickleball tournament, suddenly, for example, at Green Valley Country Club, we started the Holiday Classic. And this was at a dead period. It was between Christmas and New Year's. It's 3 days. And they regularly get between 280 and 320 people. So when you run pickleball tournaments, there's an entry fee. The entry fee is usually around $30 to $40 per person. Then you get charged per event that you do. So whether you play singles, you play doubles, you play mixed, you pay an extra $8 to $10 per event. Let's just say $10. So if your entry fee is $30, you play 3 events, now you're paying $60 per person. And if you multiply that between 200 and 300 people, it's insane the amount of people that you have, or the amount of revenue that you have, not to mention people. So, when you look at that from sheer volume of revenue, it makes sense to run pickleball tournaments over tennis tournaments. The other thing I'll say is most clubs, especially ours, we want people to come up. I believe in growing from the outside in, which means I want non-members to come and help me grow my pickleball programs because they might be all about pickleball, which is great. So, from these tournaments, we're now able to pull a lot of those players back to jump in the programs that we have with our members. So now let's just say we do a Dinks and Drinks on a Thursday night, which let's just say it was getting 24 people when we started per Thursday. Well, now it's getting like 82 people that are coming out. And ultimately, if you're wondering how I do that on 4 courts, we have temporary lines that we put on the rest of the courts. So, you have to think about, one, how many people you can put on the court, how much revenue you can make, and then what do you do with the amount of people? If you have 16 juniors that are playing and they're leaving to go back to their coaches, and we know in tennis, juniors have their coaches and they only go to their coaches. One of the disadvantages with tennis is, and I've seen it, growing up, I grew up at Baltimore, is we were great because we had so many coaches that we worked with all day long. But the disadvantage in tennis is people think that I'm going to one coach and I can't go to anybody else or listen to anybody else. So these juniors will come, they'll play a tournament, and they'll go back. People don't work together anymore. But with pickleball, these aren't people that have coaches. These are people that just want to play. They just want to be involved. So if you can pull these people to play in your programs, you're not offending anyone, you're not hurting anyone, you're just getting them on the court. Then if you have staff that actually plays tournaments or does things, these people are going to want to do lessons. And if you look in the middle picture, the guy all the way to the right is Juan Araya, who's the director of Greenwich Country Club. He's a great example, one of the biggest tennis directors in the country, #1 in paddle in the country, and now he's one of the best pickleball players in the country. And he's one of those people that did not need it. Trust me, he makes plenty of money, does not need pickleball at all. But he did it because he wanted to be, he noticed where the trend was going. He wanted to see what was next. And then he loved it just by playing. And now it's amazing seeing his courts fill all the time. So, things, when you think about, after you have the 3 foundation things, when you think about what, it's all gravy. What else do I do? Like I said, we do Dinks and Drinks, which is something that's very social. This is just a variation of open play, where now this brings out couples and it brings out friends, because now they can play pickleball, but they can also go out and they can have drinks and suddenly they're there for 4 hours. And in a club like mine, after Dinks and Drinks, they usually go and have dinner. So it's a night out. We do a lot of pro exhibitions. And again, you all being in the South are really lucky with this because a lot of the pros are there. But, when you think, how do I excite members? Again, the biggest thing is going to be the camps and clinics, because camps and clinics allow us to have our members and players playing in. So if they can play in with these pros, that's amazing. But once you have that stuff to add on after that or to mix in, is always these pickleball exhibitions. And, we've done a lot of these where we did them for charity because we could be doing good while also doing good for our members. These get a lot of publicity. If you're great at marketing, you can really use this to go on Facebook Live or live stream these things. And what I find is members, we have thousands of people that view into these. So say we've done one, the one you're looking at here, I think we only got like 50 people to come out, which for us is not a lot. It was a free event, but we ended up with like 12,000 people that viewed it, which is incredible. So, these events live longer. And after you do that and people start seeing this free marketing, they're going to start coming back to your club. And then to the right, you'll see something called 3andMe. So in pickleball, tennis, you learn a lot from one-on-one instruction. I think tennis is so important to, mix in lessons and also do clinics. One, you're focusing on something, another thing, and in clinics, you're applying something. I think, again, some of the reasons why I was so successful was getting to grow up at Baltimore and just being on the court all day long. But with pickleball, you don't get as much out of the one-on-one instruction because it's so different playing live. So what we found is 3andMe's, 3 players and a coach, are the best way to learn. And when you think about what you charge per person for pickleball, let's just charge, I don't know what the prices are down there, but let's just say we charge $80 for a tennis lesson. We could either charge $80 for a pickleball lesson, or we can charge, $30 a person for 3andMe. So the value is so much more for these people because now they're not having to pay as much and they can get the same amount of instruction, and it puts them on the courts more. Because again, I can't say it enough, it's not about how much money you can get out of one person, but how many times you can keep them coming back on the courts. Also with pickleball, as you're teaching one person, you're also talking to the group. So if I'm teaching one lady how to dink properly, I'm addressing the other two people there. So everybody's constantly picking things up. And with pickleball, you're always focusing on posture, footwork, and contact point. Doesn't matter what level you're at, what you're teaching, those are the three foundational points of teaching. So 3&Me's are really the focus on how you do that. So really for me, that's it. I just can't say enough is, the industry is constantly changing, and it's changing faster than ever before. And it's so important that we become Rackets directors and Rackets professionals. And if you can teach tennis, you're already halfway there to teaching pickleball. Tennis players pick up pickleball way quicker than anybody else. And it's very easy for us to do it wrong at the same time. Tennis players, because they come into pickleball better than everybody, think that they can just play tennis on the court. But if you invest just a little bit in learning the right way, it happens so quick. You'll be shocked at how much revenue and participation you can grow by doing it the right way. And never forget that it's not just about you. It's not just about us. It's about the people under us. Our staff will touch way more players, way more members in one day than we'll touch in a month. So if we put out somebody that's not prepared and not ready, why would people come back? I wouldn't, you wouldn't. So they're a reflection of us as leaders. So invest in yourself, invest in your staff. Everybody here is already invested because you're taking the time to, come to these USPTA events, which is so great. But the future is extremely bright for Rackets. And, from a revenue, from a participation standpoint, I really believe the best is yet to come, and we really are entering the golden age of Rackets. So thank you all for having me. I grew up in Florida, so it's always exciting to do, anything with the Southern District. So thank you all.
Wow, Jarrett, that was awesome. Thank you so much. I see a first question to ask you is, how do they get information on the temporary lines you use on the clay courts?
So you can give out my phone number and my cell, and I'm happy to help anyone. So there's many things you can do. On clay court lines, since they're dedicated, I use actual clay court lines because they're dedicated. Many times when I put temporary ones, I cut clay lines in half. So they're 1 inch instead of 2 inches. We nail them down quickly, but there's actual material temporary lines you can get. On hard courts, there's a certain type of duct tape that leaves no revenue. I'm a big fan of not putting down permanent lines in the beginning because, tennis players will freak out. Just put the tape down, pull it up. There's no revenue. On average, it costs about $1.80, which you get back, instantly when you book it. But there's so many ways to do it. I'm happy to help.
That's great. Yeah, AJ didn't want to give out his personal phone number. You might only want to do your email. Here's somebody else that asked, it scrolled by. Give me a second. Do you do drop-in clinics? Yeah,
so it's a little different at Baltimore Country Club. At Green Valley, everything was drop-in. Baltimore Country Club is, it's a very exclusive platinum club. So the members can do drop-in. If they're a non-member, they just have to call and book. I would say we're switching more towards, because participation got so high, you just can't get a spot if you drop in anymore. So I know for me as a director, it's better that way because we always know what our numbers are. But yeah, we do drop in, but I would say before you can actually do drop in, you have to build it to make sure people are there. And many times in the beginning, and it doesn't take long, the pro just has to be able to play in.
Okay, that's a great point. So a newer program, possibly drop in, but after it matures, there's just no way to pull it off.
Yeah, I can tell you when I started clay court pickleball at Green Valley, I was told, pickleball is a hardcore sport. It's a dumb idea. No one will ever do it. And, stupidly, I convinced my GM. Back then, I didn't know about temporary lines. So I just got a court relined and we wasted like $2,000. And for 2 months, I couldn't get anyone to come on the court. They said, this is dumb. I won't come. Pickleball people are very, very at the core of it, it's a park and rec sport that is now broken into country clubs. But it all changed when I just said, screw it. I'm going to take 6 people out. I found the 6 people that have the biggest mouths that would just talk like crazy. And I went out there and I played with them and they loved it. And I can tell you the week later, it started to fill just like indoor, 12, 24, 36. And, pickleball is one of those magical things that it grows from other people. It's literally tennis in the 70s. So all you have to do is go out there and play with them and just share in their excitement for the littlest. Get 30 minutes of your time. I promise you, they will literally give that back to you tenfold.
Wow, that's great advice, Jarrett. Kim Bastable, one of our speakers yesterday, talked about creating raving fans and shared a couple of examples, but that sounds like that's exactly what you did, was spend a little time, got some advocates behind it, and that was smart. Go after the people that talk the most and would create the most excitement and get them involved. That's awesome.
The one thing I just want to leave everyone with too is just that I do hear a lot, it's either tennis or pickleball, one's hurting the other. At the core of it, I teach more tennis than anything, just so you know. Like I've certified hundreds of people. We do thousands of people around the country in pickleball camps. But at my club, we do a lot of revenue, a lot of participants, a big tennis club. But that doesn't mean that pickleball doesn't have hundreds of people. So the goal for me was never revenue. It was, how do I keep growing tennis? Like, I want kids in our junior program. Well, I do that by keeping the parents there longer. So I promise you, it's not one over the other. And in the very near future, if you don't have multiple things, people are going to go where they have it. And we all have the infrastructure right now to really do this. And it's very easy to do, especially being in the South, like all of you are.
Yeah, good point. David asked, have you ever tried Spanish padel?
I love padel. I think you guys are lucky because you have Marcos down there in Orlando, who's fantastic. Love it. And, it's on our master plan in our club. They had 6 more paddle courts being built in our master plan. I made them pull 2 off and put in 2 padel courts because, when you, again, thinking what's next and following trends, you have to think a sport that's growing like padel and it's that exciting is just going to take off. I think it's like extremely hard and I love it, but I'm a huge fan of it. And, Florida, again, is leading in that.
Awesome. Jeff asked, how do we get started to rating players?
So ratings players, contact me and I'll send you some information. You can bring people down that do these ratings clinics. They're cheap. They're usually, you charge $60 a person. The certifier keeps 40, the club keeps 20. It's all designed so that anything you do with pickleball, the club makes money too, or the director that's bringing people in makes money, because the idea is, it's a shared effort. This isn't, the problem, I think, just like tennis had in the 70s with pickleball right now, is it's the Wild West and everybody's always thinking like a money grab. How do I make money? And you got to think about doing it right in the big picture, and it's all going to come. But send me an email and I can send you the info. But people are going, these are just sold out everywhere because everybody wants to know their rating. And the problem too is when you play tournaments, you have a tournament rating and your regular rating, and tournament ratings are all over the place because you go and play a pickleball tournament in Florida, you get killed. You go and play a pickleball tournament in New York, you're amazing. Similar to tennis. There's so many similarities between tennis.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, I mentioned earlier that I'll send an email out to everybody once we're all done. It has an evaluation in it, and I'm putting all the speakers' contact information, which has been emails. So do you want me to use your email from the club? Is that the best way to have them get in touch with you?
Yeah, that's fine. That's perfect.
Okay, good. Didn't want to blow up your inbox there.
Sorry about it.
Kevin, any questions from you?
Sure, Jarrett, that was terrific. I do have a question. If you imagine a pickleball program from the outset, the kind of evolution of it at a club, what I've seen happen is that sometimes the director is not real enthusiastic, but over time there will be several members of the club who are able to get enough strength and advocacy so that they get access to the courts for pickleball. The next step is that they want their friends who are not members of the club to be able to come for open play. And it kind of snowballs where you have many non-members coming in to play at the facility, and walking that back, is a little dicey. So I'm wondering what your recommendations are for pros who, have a few pickleball players, but they've got a bunch of friends who are non-members who want to come out and play?
Sure. So I think it's two questions, which are really great. First, I would say there are many directors, I see it up here, that are unenthusiastic about it, usually because once you get that big job, you never want to leave, you coast because you make plenty of money. But the issue is when you do start getting those members, just like in tennis, when you start getting those members that talk louder, that have real wants, if they're pushing for a sport and the director's not, enthusiastic about it or leading, I can tell you, like, especially platinum clubs, the director is not going to be there much longer, and they're going to replace the director with somebody that is. So, instead of that happening, it's important that, we're also leading, especially for something that's so easy. The second part, what you said, is something that comes up at my club a lot, which I think is important. And it's also important that whoever the general manager is or the manager at the club is on board. Having your courts filled is an amazing problem to have. And what we do is we make sure that members always get first sign up, no matter what we do, whether we do camps, whether we do whatever. So once members have, the first sign up, you can do it. Members can sign up as far out as they want. Maybe non-members can sign up 24 hours out. That's basically what we do. Members can sign up 2 weeks out, non-members 1 day. But what you find is once it's within the day, it doesn't matter. Because you can explain that. You can explain that you've had 2 weeks to sign up, you didn't sign up, so now we have to fill our course. And you know what, it's kind of like, if anybody knows, like, Louis Vuitton bag and Hermes bag, people want what they can't have. So the more that you can create that demand, the more you're going to have a waiting list. Waiting lists are great. That creates demand. It makes people wanting to keep coming out. It puts more value on your programs. And then you can grow from there. But, just give members the first stab at it. And then you have nothing to worry about.
All right, terrific. Thank you.
Here's another one. Chris asked, how do you contact playing pros to be able to come to your camp?
Very easy. That's probably, I know I don't have a lot of time. So if you just email me, I can do some. I know if someone just asked a question about Atlanta, I forget the name. There's a winery that's owned by managed by Cliff Drysdale outside of Atlanta. So for example, Colin and I are going there in May to do like a wine pickleball weekend for people. So there are many clubs that are bringing these pros in. But yeah, email me and I'll connect you with a bunch of pros and then you just write them. Pickleball pros are not like tennis pros. They're cheap to get them there. That's why you want to do it. You try to bring it in. Someone said, you want the Bryan brothers? I'm like, okay, they're like $25,000. So what? They're not even famous anymore, $25,000. But if I want the number one pickleball player in the world, I can get him for $2,000. And you know what? The pickleball player is going to fill my courts. It's going to excite my members, make me money, make the club money. That's what I want. I love the Bryan brothers. I think they're the greatest doubles team in the world. But if I can't get 100 people out there, well, then I'm going to get complaining. Why am I paying $1,000 to play with the Bryan brothers? So it's just, you got to utilize what makes sense right now in the big picture. I'd love to have Federer here too, but it's not possible.
I'll give you one last question, Jarrett. A friend here in Atlanta, he says he felt like you had a lot to do with the country club participation, but do you have any suggestions? He's at a smaller club or a neighborhood court. Some ideas for him.
Yes, and I'd say email me. I saw your question. When I started at Green Valley, a lot of it came from the parks and recs that were around. You want to utilize things like meetup.com, where you can easily get people to sign up. You want to utilize this. Pickleball ambassadors are the greatest gift you will ever get. You meet one pickleball ambassador, they've got an email list of over 2,000 people, and they're all so friendly and they just want to grow the game. So through them and partnering with them and working with them, it's very easy to grow. And I can give you, if you email me, some information how to find who the ambassadors are by you. But many of the programs that I grew, even at Baltimore Country Club or Green Valley or elsewhere, all happen through ambassadors. And a lot of these ratings clinics or clinics that we do aren't at country clubs. They're mostly at like parks and recs, indoor tennis clubs. A lot of what I talk about is from country clubs because that's where I am. But I can tell you this, it's a lot easier to grow pickleball. I guess it's not easier, it's just different. But you don't have to worry about, the question before about how do you balance members and non-members. All you have to do is worry about just getting people on the courts, which is easy. But email me, I can definitely help you with that.
Jarrett, Thank you so much. This was so nice of you to be willing to share. Obviously, you've done an amazing job up there, and the willingness to reach out and branch out and get involved in other racket sports is pretty amazing. So we really appreciate your coming on and sharing with us. This was awesome.
Thank you for having me.